As the sun sets from the horizon and the snow starts falling, the time has come to end the first season of Lost Legends. Last time I covered Maximo and how it started as a 3D Ghosts and Goblins title, then an AO-rated PS2 game, and now a spiritual successor / spin-off with character. Now, we are briefly talking about its sequel, and then set sights on the ill-fated third and final entry of what's supposed to be a trilogy. So ladies, gents, trans, and ghosts and goblins, welcome to the season finale of Lost Legends, Maximo Part 2, the cancel conclusion. We're changing our usual route as we already covered our brief history of the studio, but before we get to Maximo III, we need to talk about Maximo II for context. If you already know about Maximo's sequel and get on with the third game, then skip to here or find the timecode, which is a good feature. When Maximo 1 was released, I said it got positive reviews. However, the one common criticism that everyone pointed out is the very difficulty. I'm willing to bet that most of the gameplay YouTubers would show is the first set of levels and gave up before the first boss. The developers admitted it was too difficult, and some of the decisions weren't liked. So, what were the flaws of Maximo? Well, here's some. When they got the green light to design a sequel, they come up with a wish list of 50 things to fix and to add. You know, things that would be a bit more fair to the player with a side of fun. Thankfully, 49 of those things are implemented. What was the creative name for the sequel? Well, it's called Maximo vs. Army of Zin. You know, like Alien vs. Predator, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, and Star vs. the Forces of Evil. I'm going to get comments about that one, trust me. When that was done, they need a story that continues off from the first, with Maximo's untiring quest to rescue Sophia with the help of his BFF Grimm. And what we have is an invasion of clockwork robots, powered by captured souls called the Zin, led by the mysterious Lord Bane. I mean, searching for Sophia wouldn't be a great story if we don't have some conflict. The game does expand the whole lore of Maximo, like how he got that scar, there was a war with the Zin centuries ago, a redhead tomboy mechanic who doesn't have enough fan art, and all that. The game is released in September 2003 for the Japanese, and January 2004 for the rest of the world. Army of Zin is more hacking and slashing since your boy has a broader moveset like rapid firing strikes on the Zin robot for instance. Your shield doesn't break, but in its place is a super bar, which includes shield throwing and performs stronger attacks. If the bar runs out, you can't use any of those, but the shield can be its own melee weapon. Another repurposed feature is the spirits, which not only collecting 100 of them grants you a death coin, but is also used to charge a meter to summon Grimm himself, who is invincible and cut through Zin with ease. Another thing are interchangeable boxers that comes with perks, like these armored ones gives you an extra health bar for instance. The temporary sword enchantments are replaced by all new weapons Maximo could equip, like the hammer for heavy hits, a new cutlass for fire damage, and another hammer that could freeze enemies. These elements are permanent. There are more quality of life improvements, like merchants selling you stuff like new abilities and health, death coins now act as a life system, saving innocent people rewards you stuff, and it has a proper level select screen. And you can save for free. Oh, also you don't lose your abilities if you die, so that's a plus. Another improvement are the graphics, which includes more in-game cutscenes along with the FMVs where it not only had subtitles, but also improved in the art department, and their lip sync to the English voices. The music in this game is still top notch like the last one, composed by Tommy Tallarico, Chris Leash, Sam Hullock, Shane Keep, Rob King, and Michael Plowman. The levels by Bill Anderson and company had a lot more variety, like the airship level where you have to destroy generators, the Great Vault where you have to find a way out while Baron is defending himself, and some more dynamic level designs that isn't just a floor rising or collapsing on itself. With the quality of life improvements, this means that the game is more fair. Maximo doesn't die instantly on lava or deep water, but that doesn't mean the game is holding your hand. The common enemies don't die with a single sword swing, some required certain weapons to dispatch easier. The bosses are an improvement, some I had trouble with, but I can manage after a few attempts. However, it does come with a sacrifice. It's a bit shorter, I think. Like a good 4 to 5 hours opposed to the previous game's 6 to 8 last time I checked. Another flaw was this plot hole of how Achille not only reincarnated as Lord Bane, but also bring back the Zin army. It didn't say anything about this in the manual either. Now besides all that, the game received much better reviews, scoring mostly 8 out of 10s from magazines. It deserved it, and it's a damn fine piece of media that's a huge step up. And this would lead to our next question. What was Maximo III supposed to be? Well, reading through the manual for Army of Zin, there exists a Maximo comic published by the Canadian-based Dreamwave Comics. This issue, known as Beauty is Only Sword Deep, it has a very different art style than Matsushida's when judging the cover. Written by Bo Smith and artwork by Alan Wang, this is made as some sort of bridge between the first two Maximo games, with the new line of undead Maximo has to put through. And I think they're ghouls, I think. I'm surprised there wasn't any scans for this comic before I got my hands on this one. So I decided to do that myself. It didn't cost me my life savings or anything on eBay, but it's a fun little read no less. If you want more, just let us here at Dreamwave know. We'll do our best to make your Maximo dreams come true. This issue only lasted one run, and an alternate cover. And Dreamwave themselves closed their doors in 2005. There's also an interview with Maximo's executive producer Tom Sakine, but it only covers Army of Zin. Now it's time for the main event. Maximo with Vengeance. The plans for Maximo III started immediately after finishing off the sequel. And well, let me tell you a little something. There's not one, but two versions of a third Maximo game. One is simply called Maximo III, and another called Maximo and the Phantom Tower. Phantom Tower is not the working title of Maximo III, just to be clear. Let's start with Phantom Tower because there's very little information to discuss. All of the info comes from Studio 8's lead designer, Scott Rogers, via email. So the loose plot for this one is that Maximo is having a standoff against death, maybe grim, but until they are threatened by a construct called Megadeth that was threatening to take Grimm's job. It also involves wrapping up the whole love triangle arc with Maximo, Sophia, and Tinker. Oh, and you're also able to play as other characters like Tinker and Baron, but that's what was written before Dave Siller got the boot from Capcom. Oh, right. I should tell you about Siller was involved in this project, but not the other one. Yeah, extremely bare bones, but given the synopsis, this one would have stayed true to the game's identity. Given the title, the game is likely takes place in a massive tower full of dangers, skeletons, and the likes, you know, a la The Raid Redemption. That's sadly it for this one, as Scott during the time of production is undergoing some surgery, cancer related. Now let's talk about the other Maximo III, as this one had a lot more going on and the reason why I made this video in the first place. The plot of this story is that it takes place across the Southern Sea, and in the desert city of Mashhad. Maximo's crew was in bad shape during their epic search of Sophia. They encounter a cult called the Chut. Baron was killed, Tinker was captured, and Maximo himself was cursed as he and Grim are merged together as one, complete with more tattoos. Then Maximo's new adventure is to take down some cultists, lob dynamite around corners, find a cure to his curse, and prevent this city from becoming a massive sacrificial altar to cause an apocalypse. Oh, and rescue Sophia. That's the abridged version of the plot. There are some gameplay ideas in the Unseen 64 article, stating that Maximo could transform into Grim like its prequel, but a lot more fleshed out. As Grim, he could scale walls, manipulate his shadow, and pull some neat combat moves like breaking cultist shields or mortalizing ghostly foes, like he did with Vakili in Army of Zin. However, transforming to Grim drains Maximo's health as an exchange, but keep us Grim from too long would take his life. The same fleshed out treatment goes to Maximo, as his movement is more refined as he could flip backwards and sideways like in Ratchet & Clank, wall jump like in Mario 64, and you can swim this time around. The Maximo arsenal would also expand with a flintlock rifle, metal claws to scale up walls, a crossbow gauntlet to shoot arrows, and the horn to use as crowd control, or destroy certain scenery to open up new areas. It also has a lock-on system so you wouldn't miss too easily. As you can see, Maximo III was the most ambitious entry of the supposed trilogy. It plans to have more exploration and puzzles like in Zelda, a hub world, and plans to be less linear than the previous entries. Sadly, that never came to be. And why is that? If you read the articles, then it stated that the reason why it was cancelled due to Maximo II didn't sold well as expected, despite sold over 1 million copies. You know, the requirement to get the greatest hits label. No, Maximo III was also part of a few other games that Studio 8 was trying to push through but never happened. De Vargas for the PS3, and Final Fight 7 Sons were the other casualties. During the whole rewriting process, I contacted some former Studio 8 employees. Only John Hayes and Scott Rogers responded. Rogers is also the man who's responsible for leaking some of this Maximo III stuff. Unfortunately, he's out of the commission until sometime in the future because of his aforementioned medical procedure, but he does have some more documents than what was shown in the public. I also asked him why the game got cancelled in his perspective. He said that Maximo III was heading to an ugly direction. It didn't stay true to its characters, has a lot of needless political influences like the post 9/11 culture and stuff, and Middle Eastern hate, and so on. Yeah. This is one of those games that kind of falls in the definition of, yeah, a game of its time. Previously, we covered Maximo 1's betas. Maximo 2 doesn't have much going on apart from leftovers from its prequel and some concept art in this Brady Game strategy guide. As for Maximo 3, what we have for years are these low quality videos showing an early prototype of what's going to be the third entry. Looking at the gameplay, you do have some neat mechanics like wall jumping, Maximo packing heat with a musket, and holstering his equipment. However, despite the video being 240p, it's hard to look at Maximo due to its compressed quality. I wish we had some footage that's both clear and high res, but we can't have nice things. I mean, this is what we have. No leaked ROM, no high quality screenshots, nothing. What we do have is a plethora of concept art by John Hayes and Geraldo Enzo Sprigg. Before we get to talk about the concept arts from Hayes and Sprigg, imagine not mentioning the concept art shown in the Unseen 64 article. If I didn't make this, I'm gonna get comments about that, but I also included a bonus at the end of the segment. Okay, sorry if this feels abrupt. It was a late edition and I don't have time redoing the pre-release chapter again. So let's take a look at the other art, which is in a lower resolution. Let's begin with the environments. If you've already seen this one before, which is this. Now here's two more in what's like the same kind of setting. The next one looks like a cavern of sorts, with a raging river below, and above is a rickety rope bridge that's ready to crumble. The last two are the more detailed looks. Okay, maybe not in this size, but the left pic is the city gates, and the other is what's like a torture chamber and city walls with spikes on top. Sadly, that one is probably cut off like the others. Next are the civilians of Mashad, which is self-explanatory. Then more Chut cultists in color. One is a reference sheet, likely for modeling. Another is the one cultist shown before in full color, along with a beefy muscle man with a big old sword on his side. This one here is likely the high priest from what I looked at in the documents, and behind him is some sort of Chut monster. The last one isn't documented, but according to the chained morning stars and bony appearance, he is likely some sort of undead ghoul summoned by Chut necromancers. Lastly, Maximo himself. The black and white pic here I don't have much to say, but the next one I used for the thumbnail is giving me some Twilight Princess vibes, despite missing the facial scar. He's also growing some beard, sporting a different sword, and having a piece of shoulder armor. The next piece is the supposed Grim form. From this stance, he's likely gonna bust through some walls like the Kool-Aid Man. The last one I stumbled upon is this piece, which is the only high-res look at this version of Maximo. By the way, all this concept art shown is made by a man named Trent Canigua. Yeah, his art may look familiar to some, but he worked on Diablo 3, League of Legends, and currently working on a Metroidvania known as Twilight Monk. Okay, let me get this out of the way. I'm not going to shame this man for making some concept art, let alone concept art for Maximo III. Maximo III was his first video game to make the concept arts. Also, here's another Maximo III sketch by him, along with some sort of Chut cultist disguise that was cut off. Do you think by any chance that one day Canigua would stumble upon this video? Well, Scott Rogers commented on the last part, so maybe? Alright, that is all. Now back to our regularly scheduled pre-release segment. This page here is a bunch of doodles not entirely focused on Maximo III itself, even though it featured Maximo holding a gun. The surrounding characters, I want to say this is Maximo III related, and I hedge my bets that the two girls on the left is Tinker. For Enzo's side, we have what's possibly 2 to 3 images related to the cultists, showing off these freaky designs, the fez hats, and blades everywhere. The cultists don't wield shotguns and hide in corners, but they plan on having a distinct combat style where they have ragdoll-like movements. Beyond the concept art is the early outline. This would have showed what the game's story is like, so spoilers for a game that's been cancelled for over 15 years. So Maximo and friends ended up in the desert in bad shape, met some cultists, and Baron was killed. Tinker was captured and later rescued, and found themselves in the desert city of Mashad. She sets up shop in the bazaar, and Maximo goes out and learns about the Chut cult and help out some people in some side quests. His search for Sophia ends up with a false lead to a tomb where he fights a boss. Then at night, Maximo does his small quests and found out the truth of the Chut and where Sophia was held. Then he travels to an outpost and grabs a relic to disguise him and gain access to the main temple, not after he faces a boss. This is where the twist kicks in. Sophia, the woman Maximo was thirsting over in the past 2 games, is the cult leader. He was sent to the torture chambers where he escaped and found out his tomboy mechanic is also killed. The city is going under a sandstorm. He must escape and lose the cultists, which eventually lead him to an oasis to recover. This leads to the confrontation in the cult temple against Sophia, who summoned the demon Chut, and the final battle commences. This is where it ends, unfortunately. In other words, no happy ending. Maximo probably killed Sophia as she revealed to be a cult leader who wanted an apocalypse. His other living friends are killed, and I'm not sure he was cured from the curse him and Grim were fused. As you can see, the game's plot is going places where it shouldn't be. So here's a question. What is the miscellaneous stuff? Throughout this entire season of Lost Legends, this chapter usually talks about the game's cut content. This chapter doesn't exclusively talk about that stuff, and I did say on the very first episode that I like to make theories. Time to put that to good use. So, Maximo III. I know the plotline for this wasn't the final version, but even though Maximo III is going to be the conclusion, I think it's going to be a huge step back. The signs are clear, like Susumu Matsushita wasn't hired to do the artwork, killing off key characters, and David Siller unfairly forced out by Capcom and replaced by someone else. The main problem with this is the very identity. Besides going around whacking skeletons in a cartoony gothic setting, now we're in this desert, fighting cultists, and trying to be the Prince of Persia with a mix of Zelda. The game's influence comes from the post-9/11 culture, with the desert setting, cults, and some other things that reeks of that mid-2000s aesthetic. It ain't me just saying it either. Scott Rogers agreed in both my emails and a little blogger post that this shouldn't be the direction for Maximo in retrospect. In addition, the studio's last game is Final Fight Streetwise, and I heard that was so god-awful the studio was shut down within a month after its release. Not to mention, Streetwise lacks the fundamentals of what made the originals great, and that the gameplay is clunky, the story is boring, dialogue have more needless swears than a Tarantino film, the save system is bugged, the Xbox port is a dumpster fire, and there's no poison. Then again, Streetwise is a much different game in development, and its beta looks more like Final Fight than what Final Fight Streetwise was. Also, do you remember the bit that Maximo 1 was going to have gritty graphics but Capcom Japan rejected the idea? Well, things have changed within years when Streetwise was released. And not to mention, Capcom also published the Japanese releases of Rockstar's titles, like GTA and Red Dead Revolver. Given that idea, Capcom Japan wanted the studio to reskin Final Fight's cel-shaded graphics to be more gritty and realistic, the gameplay to be more open-ended, and added another reason why the higher-ups from Capcom Japan are the worst. According to Unseen64's interview with Scott Rogers, the new management at Studio 8 doesn't fare much better, as he was constantly disruptive and pretty much ran the studio to the ground. Allegedly. Also, these tweets of Siller where he is a little unhinged regarding about Capcom, stating that Maximo was made as a tax write-off or something, and Capcom deliberately tried to make it a financial failure, which they did in the sequel. Well, thing is, Siller's Twitter account is long gone, and I'm looking at some old screenshots. Don't know why he went up and closed the accounts, but we're not gonna go deep into it. Will we ever get our hands on Maximo III? I'm not so sure, but in the stray odds we do, long after this video is uploaded, someone's gonna make one with some higher quality footage this time around. But alas, a man can dream. At one hand, I'm glad Maximo III didn't happen. On the other, I wish there was some closure and should have stuck with the Phantom Tower idea. Maximo III was an unfortunate case of a canned conclusion of otherwise a great trilogy. However, a concoction of internal conflicts, bad management, a crap game they didn't want to make, and a studio shutdown led to its grand fate. Maximo will be one of those games that companies with Half-Life as unfinished trilogies. There is also another planned Capcom trilogy that never happened, but that's a story for another day. I may be skeptical, but sometimes these would be better off without some sort of conclusion. I mean, I've seen series that end and fell flatter on their ass. Others took a few steps back, and some were planned to be a whole series but never got off the first one. Then again, this is where the season ends for now. If you got some canned video games or very early interpretations of finished games, please let me know. 2 years, 12 episodes, and under 100 subscribers. But there will be more Lost Legends coming soon. Next time I will be doing some unfinished business with a certain redhead with a beta build I've recently got in my hands. And then I'm heading back to the dark world of Twisted Metal to remake the black sequel that never was. If you're interested, hit the like, hit subscribe, and follow the White Rabbit so you won't miss a damn thing. And I'll see you later. Bye.